welcome everybody to another Sacred Wisdom podcast. In this podcast today, we are going to discuss the bright landmarks of Tartaria. And by this, we are talking about the lighthouses, the beacons, the markers were the places where how they navigated around the world. And lighthouses actually date back to 2000 BC or around that date. There is traces of early lighthouses. So this is quite incredible. So this kind of goes against the narrative a little bit. And I am joined with my amazing brother as always. Hello, Stephen. How are you?
Hello, Zach. How's everything with you?
It's fantastic, my brother. Everything is great. And you're going to go into detail and discuss this with the lovely audience today and talk
Yeah.
about these landmarks. Now, there's many lighthouses built. So let's start with the Kassi Lighthouse. And this
Yeah.
was what I just mentioned, 2000 years old.
Yeah.
Now, unbelievable. It's quite incredible.
So we need to bring this into the context of this outlining, obviously, the distant past when it comes to the civilization of Hyperborea. Now, when further archaeological excavations are done across northern Russia, in areas like the Kola Peninsula, the Murmansk Oblast of northwestern Russia, in parts of the Yamal-Nenets Autonomous Okrug of north-central Russia, and all the way across to the Russian Far East.
That's the northern part, just
That's
again.
right. Yes, right. And Siberia, along the Russian Arctic coast, that's likely they will find the remnants of Hyperborean lighthouses, or for want of a better phrase. But for the sake of what we're discussing at the moment in this Sacred Wisdom podcast, it is known that in the portside cityscape known as Kuntasi, that there was in the Bronze Age a incredible lighthouse. It was built between around 1934 BC to 1926 BC. And there was a civilization that is known as in the Indus, that was part of the Indus Valley and Vedic India, and the Kuntasi lighthouse was an integral aspect of that civilization. Now we know that this site is located on the right side of the Fulki River, which is about 1.2 miles or about 2.0 kilometers southeast of Kuntasi village, and around 18.6 miles or 30.0 kilometers from the cityscape of Morbi or Morvi in the Melia Taluka of the Morbi district, which is in the Gujarat state of Western India. Now, this Kuntasi lighthouse was specifically a bright landmark on that coastal area, and it was there to obviously create safe passage for various boats, sailing vessels in that location along the Fulki River in that part of Western India. So we know that if you go back to the Bronze Age, the Kuntasi lighthouse most definitely existed and has been confirmed by repeated archaeological excavations in India, in southern Asia.
Now, obviously, these were to navigate the ships and keep
Yeah.
them away from the coast, but there were other means as well that was going on here as well, wasn't there? Because these were harnessing the telluric energy. These old lighthouses, there's no direct proof of this, but we
Yeah.
can see how over time lighthouses pre 18th century, before the 18th century, were actually they had little antennae and various components, and also as
Aerials,
well they
exactly.
used what
Yeah.
is known as mercury, obviously.
Yes. And the point you're making there is that, whether it's the Kuntasi lighthouse, whether it's any other lighthouses, whether they are defined as being part of the civilization of Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire, or elsewhere on planet Earth, we can put that aside. The point here is that a lot of these lighthouses, whether from the Bronze Age, such as the Kuntasi lighthouse, were appearing to be self-powered. There was nothing found in the archaeological researches that was to suggest that there was combustible substances placed there, such as anthracite coal or timber or chunks of wood, to actually create some kind of pinnacle where there was a lantern, a bonfire, or something else. What is known is that, from what we understand from Vedic India and the Vimanas, that there was certain types of occult technology, and it appears that with the Kuntasi lighthouse, this may well have been connected as part of the civilization in the Indus Valley and Vedic India to these types of occult technology. So that in itself is interesting to speculate over,
Mm.
regardless of what the whole situation with Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire and its emergence, beginning really with early Tartaria. And obviously all of the various activities that took place with Genghis Khan and the Golden Horde of the Mongol Empire, who really should be credited with the founding of early Tartaria that then led on to the development of Great Tartaria and its usage of the luminiferous ether to, or the telluric electricity, which was also used to power the various Tartarian lighthouses. It is not just the case here that we are looking at the usage of the luminiferous ether or telluric electricity, as was the case with Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire. It is likely that other civilizations also going much further back into the historical timelines, such as the Indus Valley civilization in Vedic India with the Kassi Lighthouse, may well have been using some kind of occult technology to self-power that building, so that they didn't have to use combustible substances such as anthracite coal or timber to keep it actually illuminated.
I mean, whale oil was used to kind of create, and that was only in the 1700s, 1800s that changed over.
Yes.
Previously to before that, they actually did use mercury.
Yeah,
So the mercury was used to kind of create the light to go around,
that's
twisting
right.
around. But so the Tassie Lighthouse that was discovered around 1920 by a Sir John Herbert Marshall.
Yes,
Is that
that's right.
correct?
So it's known that sometime around the 18th of March, 1920, the highly respected British archaeologist from Chester in northwest England, known as Sir John Hubert Marshall, initiated the excavation at Harappa, which is where the Indus Valley civilization and with its connections to Vedic India really centrally arose. And he actually did this excavation alongside the director of works known as Daya Ramesh Sani. The
Right.
results of these efforts were then printed on around the 20th of September 1924 in the Illustrated London News, which revealed a prehistoric civilization had thrived across the Indus Valley of northwestern India and
Wow.
even had its own type of writing. Now, Sir John
Interesting.
Hubert Marshall and Daya Ramesh Sani then went on to find these remnants that became verified as the Kassi Lighthouse. I thought it was just important to mention that to add a
Yeah.
bit more information to the backstory of that discovery.
I thought it was interesting that they had their own writing, so there's a language that
Yeah.
couldn't be understood, and they
Yes. Yes. So again, we have these linguistic and phonetic isolates where there is some interconnection, say, with the Indus Valley civilization to Sanskrit. We see this with the Tartarian language that
yeah
was so prevalent in northern Russia and elsewhere in the colonies of Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire, which itself has to the various has relations to the various Turkic languages and aspects of the Finno-Ugric languages as well. So what we are being taught by Western science is largely a distortion or incorrect. They're not discussing much about these linguistic and phonetic isolates with these civilizations. They're not interested in discussing Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire and considering the credibility of Tartarian lighthouses, let alone really much to do with the Kuntasi lighthouse in India and so forth. And this just goes on and on and on. Anything that does not fit into the historical narrative in the
no
3D holographic reality of this material dimension that Western science does not want us to know about because it might help to stir and awaken human consciousness to realize that, Homo sapiens or human beings have an incredible potential has to be suppressed and put aside. And I
mm,
think this is the case when we're looking at the historical timelines of these different lighthouses, whether it's from Great Tartaria or the Old World Empire, or whether it's the Kassi Lighthouse in India.
mm,
What we're looking at is speculating on how these were powered. Was it to do with some kind of mercury vortex generator? Were they drawing down the luminiferous ether or telluric electricity to self-power. And as I said, with the Kassi Lighthouse, through the archaeological excavations that were made by Sir John Hubert Marshall and Dea Ramesh Sani, it really wasn't found any remnants in terms of any chemical analysis of anthracite coal or
Mm,
petrified timber or woody kind of materials. Nothing was found to confirm that they were being used as combustibles, and the usage of whale oil as a
mm,
fuel source to illuminate any kind of lighthouse was not really in usage, because obviously the process of extracting that whale oil didn't really come about into a much later stage in the historical narrative. So again, we have to question, again, the official narratives that we're given by Western science when it comes to the distant past.
I mean, it's interesting. He was a sir, obviously someone that's
Yeah,
knighted and
yeah.
part of the establishment, and he actually got sent across and tasked with that. That's what do you think he was trying to find? In the sense to if
But
the
if you go back to the,
policymakers just wanted to wrap it up, why did they send someone over there to investigate, do the archaeological dig?
again, that's open to speculation. It's a valid question, but we can say that during the Victorian age and the Edwardian period, the amount of British archaeologists that were on their travels across planet Earth was prolific.
Yeah,
And we have to remember, back at this time, the whole of Mother India was part of the British Empire.
yeah,
So
of course.
this individual, Sir John Hubert Marshall, working with the Dea Ramesh Sani, would be actively involved in multiple excavations. That was just probably one of many, and he had probably an extensive record of being very, very credible in terms of excavating and discovering artifacts and remnants of buildings and anything you can think of as historical evidence for civilizations of the past, like the Indus Valley
Mm,
civilization, and which was really integrally connected to Vedic India. And
mm.
we do need to remember, if you look at the timeline of the Kassi Lighthouse in the Bronze Age, and then we take a look at the occult technology that was used to design and manufacture the Vamana, or
Mm.
traverses, as it translates to in the English language from the Sanskrit,
Some
in
would
the
argue that
India.
they didn't exist, though, wouldn't they? I mean,
But
some,
then
I mean,
this
but there
that
is
phrase
evidence.
you've just given,
Yeah,
some would argue that we can take that phrase for anything that is not part of the official narrative presented by Western science, because the logical approach that some people use is, well, if we needed to know about it and needed to be educated by academics from Western science, it would be then presented to us. Why would they keep it from us? Because
yeah,
they don't understand that the actual wider aspects of suppression, censorship, and the shaping of human consciousness or human awareness for specific reasons within the 3D holographic reality we've defined as the material dimension,
yeah,
and how that connects actually to frequencies, vibrations, and energetic resonances within the 4D holographic reality of the astral plane, where a lot of the policymakers, you can call them elites, secret societies, have connections to, in terms of ceremonial magic, in terms of
yeah,
ritualism. And that's important to them, dates and times and ritualistic thinking. So
yeah.
again, the general public, Homo sapiens or human beings, aren't really that clued up in terms of understanding the lingua occultica, or the hidden language that's used by these rulers or policymakers. And it's
Mm,
very important to understand there's been a huge editing process going on for many, many decades on planet Earth to do with historical timelines, and that includes obviously the Kassi Lighthouse, the Tartarian Lighthouses, the actual. We can definitely consider this, and I'd say, but definitely say that the actual Hyperborean lighthouses were more than likely actual. They really did
mm,
exist. And it
mm.
makes sense, because where you've got navigation with aerial traffic, or traffic that's, using higher altitudes over water bodies, where you're having large numbers of boats and sailing vessels moving around in the daytime, in the nighttime, across the Russian Arctic coast,
Mm.
you would need to have these bright landmarks,
Yeah,
these
course.
beacons, these
Especially in a sea like round that part of the world.
oh,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the waters are very turbulent in the Arctic North Polar region. So we know that these different types of um, buildings are integral to these civilizations of the past.
Mm.
But they were and they still are, because in terms of our perceptivity of what is going on, they had to be given consideration as well, even though perhaps many individuals may not perceive lighthouses as important as stately homes or palaces or the healing temples of the white cities of Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire, for example, whether that was in northern Russia, whether that was in the Caucasus region or Eastern Europe or the North American continent, and whether India, Australia, and so forth.
Mm.
But these are all integral aspects that we need to analyze, we need to look at,
Indeed.
and use critical thinking with to really understand. And I do believe that when it comes to the Bronze Age, when we look at this Kassi Lighthouse, it is possible that it was self-powered through the
Mm.
use of mercury. So, and it
Very
was
remote where it is.
absolutely,
That's what you want to know. I
absolutely,
mean, actually, all lighthouses, for that note, yeah, they're all very remote. There's many lighthouses around the world. In Wikipedia and
yeah,
the kind of historical narrative we've been given, the oldest lighthouse is actually the Pharos of Alexandria,
that's right, yeah.
and that was around 280 to 247 BC. Now,
Yeah.
who, I mean, in the way we're told about that narrative, we really have no clue. And
No, I mean
this,
when
I
you
mean,
take
what happened between the Contasi, that 2,000 year period between
yeah.
then and the Contasi? There must have been hundreds of if not
I think
thousands.
absolutely, but just through, earthquakes, sea quakes, volcanic activity on planet Earth, coastal erosion, much of these different archaeological remnants, they're destroyed. I think when we look at the lighthouse of Alexandria that some people call the Pharos of Alexandria, apparently we're told that it took 12 years to construct and it was constructed by the Macedonian Greek pharaoh known as Ptolemaios Philadelphos. Some
Can
people
I
know.
just ask, how did that information be obtained? How did they understand that that was the person? Was that written on a tablet or?
It must have been, it must have been chiseled on stone tablets in papyrus, perhaps other forms of written documentation. Now we know that this Macedonian Greek pharaoh, known as Ptolemaeus Philadelphos, was more commonly known as Ptolemy II, and so it's believed that the Pharos of Alexandria was constructed between 284 BC to 246 BC. It was apparently the Greek architect known as Sostratos Krostenitou who apparently designed the Lighthouse of Alexandria or the Pharos of Alexandria.
Right.
Now, again, like you just asked, when we're given the information that the Greek architect known as Sostratos Krostenitou actually constructed the Lighthouse of Alexandria or the Pharos of Alexandria, we're just meant to accept that is the historical narrative.
Mm.
So it's believed also that the Pharos of Alexandria was the prototype for pretty much all European lighthouses. Now, again, is that historically correct, or is that again Western science just literally rinse and repeat, put it out there, cover up the past? I mean, the fact that the Kuntasi lighthouse isn't really given much academic consideration,
Mm.
even though there's been extensive archaeological researches, excavations, and discoveries there, in that part of Western India as part of, the discovery of the civilization called the Indus Valley
Mm.
civilization. But for
Mm.
some reason, this is all just put aside. So anyway, there you go. That's the officially accepted historical narrative that this lighthouse, the Pharos of Alexandria, was the first or the initial lighthouse on planet Earth, which it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, really, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, you've got loads as well. You've got these structures, and I mean, what
Yeah,
they actually look like. I mean, the Pharos of Alexandria would have been very high.
yeah,
The kind of what I've seen of the kind of ideas, the concepts of what it was, incredibly huge. But you had the Colossal of Rhodes, I
yeah. The
believe,
Colossus of Roads. That's right. Yeah,
and that was like a figurine, wasn't it? So
yeah,
they had these kind of like the Statue of Liberty, you know.
yes. And we, again, the Pharos of Alexandria was defined as the seventh wonder of the ancient world.
That's
Now,
right.
apparently, seismic tremors in August 956 AD, again in February 1303 AD, and October 1323 AD,
Yep.
kind of really destroyed the remnants of the Lighthouse of Alexandria or the Pharos of Alexandria, which apparently completely disappeared, inverted commas, on the 25th of September 1480. Now, what's interesting to note,
There's a shed left, apparently. It's like a concrete
yeah,
flat. There's no
yeah,
lighthouse, but there was actually a huge lighthouse on there once.
yeah. And what is interesting to note is that this sort of period, this duration in terms of chronology, was before the emergence of early Tartaria, which
Mm,
came along and emerged in northern Russia not long after that.
mm.
So again, when it comes to understanding Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire, we need to then go back and look at the Scythian Empire, and therefore many of the Scythian kingdoms that were remnants of the Scythian Empire that itself had arisen out of the civilization of Hyperborea in the Arctic North Polar region in northern Russia, and look at migrations of different populations going into southern Russia, going into Central Asia, and perhaps moving across there down into Asia Minor, the Middle East, and perhaps into parts of southern Europe, and
Yeah.
perhaps speculating there was these movements of populations in in the antediluvian period and for many successive durations in terms of chronological timelines after that. And again, none of this is accepted by Western science as factual. It's just classed as more conspiracy theories. So it's all just again suppressed, ignored by the masses. And we're given this official timeline, these official imprints about historical narratives, and we have to just accept that in schools, colleges, and universities as the shaping process of this 3D holographic reality we define as the material dimension at all times.
Yeah, and these lighthouses, there was many all over the world. So, you can go all over the place.
Yeah,
Ireland is one I got located here. This is a lot later,
yeah,
but 1172, Richard de Clare. It was home to the monks up to the 17th century.
yeah,
And it was apparently yeah, again, and the concept that these lighthouses use coal
mm,
to coal burning is so kind of ridiculous.
yeah,
It would have been highly dangerous to do that.
yeah,
And also as well, the way they put it across, these lighthouses were made out of wood, some of them.
yeah. Well, again, I mean,
No,
if
which
they
is
make,
true,
yeah,
which is true. I'm
it
not
is
saying they're
true.
all
It is.
Tartarian. I'm just giving the idea. There's a lot of
Yeah.
mixed ideas about these lighthouses and what
Yeah,
they
I
were.
mean there is, and again, it's an intermittent historical timeline. I think there's been a lot of editing that's taken place, and we know that the famous Euboean prince, known as Palamedes Naplio or Palamedes Olymbio, built a Hellenic lighthouse on the Greek island of Euboea, nearby to the central Greek mainland, from around 1325 BC to 1318 BC.
Yeah,
Even though he built the Hellenic lighthouse on the Greek island of Euboea, this astute Euboean prince actually came from the temple city of Naplia or Naplia in the Argolis region of the Peloponnese or Morea Peninsula in southern Greece. So he obviously saw the importance of building this Hellenic lighthouse, even though he wasn't actually geographically located in the location where it was constructed. So these were obviously seen as pinnacles of importance. They had to be constructed in coastlines, whichever country they were built within. So Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire, it was obviously something very long term, and it was globalized. It was all across, therefore, planet Earth. That the construction of these world lighthouses in different architectural styles was taking place.
now this is just purely from all the research we've done and looking into things, and I would this possibly that these the way ships traveled in the past was not necessarily on the sea.
Yeah,
And we could have actually been traveling. I mean, if you think about, you're a civilization, would you construct a boat to go across the Atlantic? Wouldn't it be easier to create flights and actually go across the Atlantic. As
Again,
a,
this does
constructive
get, yeah,
means,
yeah.
I mean, if we go back to the Vimanas and this technology was available, it's very likely that these were used for some sort of
I
airship
totally,
or
I
and
think,
literally
yeah,
like an
absolutely.
airboat, you know?
Yeah, I think that the use of aircraft from the antediluvian period was very, very commonplace on planet Earth. You
Mm,
know, we could also look at the idea of these different Tartarian lighthouses, as with lighthouses from the antediluvian period, from the Bronze Age, such as with the Kassi Lighthouse. If there was these Vimana, which means traverses in the English language, translated from the Sanskrit,
yeah,
and we look at the airships of Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire, instead of actually having these tethering masts, maybe perhaps some of these lighthouses were used also to tether
yeah.
some circumstances in the remotest locations, some of these Vimana or traversers, these airships of Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire, and
Mm,
perhaps they could actually recharge the onboard electrical generators or capacitors for actual levitation and air flight purposes, or the loading and offloading of passengers. So there would have been obviously the internal stairwells that spirally move upward to the top, the rooftop, the pinnacle of these lighthouses may have had landing platforms, as well as tethering ropes and clamps that could have been used to bring in and fix into place these various airships. Again, I'm just putting it out there as
it's all
speculation.
possible.
You can
I
visualize that. And the reason why you there would therefore have these Tartarian lighthouses, whether they were constructed on the Russian Arctic coast, whether they were constructed in the various colonies of Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire, was because they would be very brightly illuminated. They were the bright landmarks or
yeah,
beacons and lighthouses to be seen many miles away. So if you've got airships traveling through the night skies,
of course, you see the light and you
you know exactly
makes
where to
complete
go.
sense. Yeah.
We know that in Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire, they weren't using radar, such as we see
Yeah.
with air traffic control systems in the modern age.
Mm,
So what they were using the geomagnetic ley lines, they were using sound in what way we don't feel in terms of electroacoustic resonances, and they were using, obviously more than anything else, beams of light or photons, and therefore luminescence, as a form of aerial guidance and mapping to get from point A to point B.
yeah. I mean, it's funny how when you look at computer games and sort of fantasy novels and things like this, and
Yeah,
it's quite often you see these kind of new, what would I say, sort of sci-fi type flying ships, going
yeah,
through the air, and that they were like old pirate ships going through the air with, futuristic
yeah,
lights and stuff like that. It's very possible, and it makes sense that whole kind of period in the 50s we had of all this kind of metropolis type
yeah.
inventions and visuals, the Art Deco era, that kind of where all
That's
that came
right.
from. It's interesting.
And if you think, when it comes to like Royal Air Force bases or
Mm,
United States Air Force bases or NATO Air Force bases and so forth, they have runways such as, you look at even like Heathrow Airport, Gatwick Airport, and so forth here in the United Kingdom of Great Britain. They
yeah.
have runways for aircraft. Now we know that aircraft really weren't something that was manufactured or used in Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire. We know this. If people want to know the reason, the viewers, obviously we discussed in previous Sacred Wisdom
And,
podcasts.
and where just for the viewers, just so you could say, where did you get that information?
I
Again,
was
was that
about to, yeah, I was just going to say from
sorry.
the medieval period or the Middle Ages, there are many woodcuts, mainly in the later medieval period, from what we now call, we call the Russian Federation. Back then it was medieval Russia, then it became Imperial Russia, showing these very ornate and differently designed, uniquely designed airships
Mm.
that look something out of a fantasy picture book.
Well, it's no
Um,
by no accident that Leonardo da Vinci had all these plans in the 15th century, and I
Absolutely.
mean, you
Yes.
wouldn't just have a load of plans to build something unless it'd been built, or
And where did Leonardo da Vinci get the idea? He didn't just,
of
he
course,
was an expert in terms of being a painter and a fine artist, But and he was a genius in his own right. Yes, Leonardo da Vinci was a very unique and profound individual. But where did all that come from? Was he being supplied by the elites and the secret societies of the medieval period, or the Middle Ages, with information that had come from Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire, or
Mm.
from perhaps a remnant of the civilization of Hyperborea? Again, we don't know. It's open to speculation, but it's very interesting to note that suddenly, out of
Submarine,
nowhere,
helicopter,
yeah,
a
yeah,
flying plane. I mean, how would you do that? How would you? A submarine is, if anybody's aware, submarines are a very complex bit of machinery.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's not something that period of time, 15th, what, 16th century,
Well,
that
and think very
insane.
carefully. What which country was he from? Italy.
Mm.
Who was he very closely
Mm.
aligned with? The Roman Catholic Church and the Vatican City State and the Jesuit order. So the
Yeah.
question is, where did all that information, in terms of perhaps the initial schematics, the initial designs, or the initial pictorial, diagrams, where did that information come from that so profoundly influenced his artistic mannerisms and his stylization? Where did that come from? And
Possibly
that's
could be the
again open
Vatican
to
Library.
question,
Just
isn't it?
saying.
Yeah, just
Just saying. I don't know. You know.
yeah. So
But but yeah, amazing. I more incredible. The more you look into Leonardo da Vinci, quite, yeah, as you said, he was an amazingly intelligent guy, 100%, of course.
yeah,
But just what he covered, the broad range as an
yeah,
artist, and
yeah.
the subject matter, I mean, is quite immense.
So when we look at Tartarian lighthouses, we know they, because of the Tartarian architecture and the usage of the luminiferous ether, or telluric electricity, by these Nordic Tartarians and the Turkic peoples and other inhabitants of the Old World Empire, that they had developed their own kind or purposeful stylization when it came to the construction of these lighthouses. So that's interesting itself. They were so unique in their thinking,
Mm.
so unique in their intentions, for the when it came to the development of their own civilization, which was all based on spiritual principles, the Christ awareness. So I'd say when it comes to the usage of these Tartarian lighthouses, it is likely they were used for many other purposes, and I do feel they were these bright landmarks or beacons, not just for maritime navigation purposes along the Russian Arctic coast, but also for perhaps aerial docking purposes of the airships of Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire, for the
Yeah.
offloading and onloading of passengers and various commercial payloads.
I mean, the Colossus of Roads, particularly looking into that and the imagery, it blew my mind actually. And
Yeah,
then looking at roads today, that
yeah,
area, and how different, and it's still beautiful. Don't get me wrong, but how
yes,
more ugly it's got. And again, this is what we go back to. We've spoken about before, and how ugly these,
yeah, yes,
wherever you
yeah,
believe in it, the
absolutely.
decline of this beauty, in
Yes, the
architecture
elegant,
and
the
buildings.
elegance and the elegance and the beauty of the
Mm,
ancient world. And obviously, and we saw that, with the development of early Tartaria into Great Tartaria. But when you go back to the classical period of ancient Greece, and you look, for example, at the Colossus of Rhodes,
mm.
which was purported to have been designed by the Greek sculptor known as Chares Ishkaru. Most people know him as Chares of Lindos, around 280 BC, and
Wow.
then became another of the seven wonders of the ancient world. But
Mm.
again, here we have these convenient seismic ruptures, and one apparently occurred in
Oh.
226 BC, and this seismic rupture completely toppled the Colossus of Rhodes.
Oh,
So
right.
then it disappears like the Pharos of
Yeah.
Alexandria.
That had two earthquakes. Yeah. That's the same thing. And that's happened throughout, isn't it? I mean, what's interesting is the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
I find that now, again, no proof of this whatsoever. And obviously it's told that it was constructed and all this, but
Yes.
that could have very well been some sort of lighthouse, couldn't it?
It
Of
could
some
well.
nature.
I mean,
It makes
technically,
sense.
yes,
It was built on a star fort,
that's
or,
correct. Yeah.
or
I mean,
seems like a
again,
star-shaped building. That's anyway.
Well, again, it's again open to speculation. It was definitely built on over a star fort in that part of the eastern seaboard of the United States of America.
Yeah.
But again, there's so many unanswered questions when it comes to understanding the purpose of many of the buildings in Great Tatar and the Old World Empire, and that's why we discuss so prolifically the various buildings and the way the Tartarian architecture more than likely was used. But again, we don't have a lot of officially accepted and granted documentation. And it is ironic that most of the information is coming out of the Russian Federation, which
Mm,
is largely being ignored, as I've said many times before, by Western science. Because I feel whether it's the Tartarian lighthouses, whether it's the usage of the luminiferous ether or telluric electricity, whether it's the airships of Tartaria and the Old World Empire, and so on and so on, the use of vault lights, the use of the healing temples and the tuning forks and the stained glass windows and the metallic pipe organs and choral singing and prayer work. Just goes on and on and on and on. And what you find is all of it is going to be ignored. And just
mm,
as when it comes to the remnants of these Hyperborean pyramids that have been found in the Kola Peninsula, the Murmansk Blast of northwestern Russia.
mm.
Some of the remnants of these Hyperborean periods have been found in the Yamal-Nenets Autonomous Okrug of north central Russia, and also in the Russian Far East and Siberia and the Kamchatka Peninsula of northeastern Russia, and again, and in many other locations across generically northern Russia. And again, a lot of this is just simply ignored. It's sidelined, suppressed, even when it comes to actually looking at really intricate technical data
Mm.
where scientific guidelines have been followed that are comparative to those used by academics in Western science. So it's just all classed as conspiracy theories of no relevance. Move on. Again, nothing to see here.
Now
So,
you can, everybody watching, if you can check out the Hidden History episode, and that's called the Lighthouses of Tartaria, and then we've also got the Beacons of Tartaria,
that's
which is
right.
in on the Sacred Wisdom podcast. But just finish up on this note, Steve. You had
Yeah,
which I was blown away when, not many people know about this unless you look into it, but it's the Fair de Monde
that's right.
at the Paris World Fair.
Yes.
Now, that is kind of shocking. I mean, a real snub in the face. It wasn't actually built,
Yeah.
was it? But it was,
No.
go and explain that a bit, because it was like nearly a mile high, wasn't
Yeah.
it? The plans for this, or is around that, with car park up the top, restaurant,
That's right.
all this, and it was like a corkscrew as well, wasn't it? So you actually
Yes.
drove around it, which I thought was really bizarre. The Exposition Universelle, or the Paris Exposition, and
Yeah.
what that was. There were dates before that.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact dates, but the World Fairs where they were actually selling lighthouses.
Yeah.
So they
Well, we
actually,
know we know at the Exposition Universelle, or the Paris Exposition, that was facilitated on the 1st of April 1867 to the 3rd of November 1867 in Paris, north central France. There was a lot of discussion about European lighthouses.
that's
There
right.
were certain individuals sharing schematics and diagrammatic plans of futuristic looking European lighthouses. But we know that the Fair de Monde, or Lighthouse of the World, as it was translated to in the English language, was designed by Eugene Freyssinet.
Mm,
And his design was a technical mimicry of the Tartarian lighthouses that themselves have been emulations in terms of their features and designs, that is defined generically as Tartarian architecture of Hyperborean lighthouses that had existed with such prevalence in the Russian Arctic coast, going back into the antediluvian period. So we know, for example, that the Fair de Monde, or Lighthouse of the World, had then been designed for the World's Fair that became known as the Exposition Internationale des Arts et Techniques dans la Vie Moderne, or the International Exposition of Art and Technology in Modern Life, that was facilitated from the 25th of May 1937 to the 25th of November 1937 on the Charlotte Hill in the Trocadero of the 16th arrondissement of Paris in north central France. Now, it's
wow,
interesting, that was in
amazing
the
date.
It was, and that's the interwar period.
Yeah.
So even then, some of these remnants from Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire were still being lovingly remembered and given some kind of honor by, planners, designers, and architects. And on this occasion, it was never going to be constructed. It would have
Mm.
been the largest edifice, obviously, in Paris
In the
and the
world,
whole
to
of
some level,
France,
I think in the world, to be
in the
honest, Steve.
world, at around planet Earth, of course. And
Mm.
so what we see is it never took place. It was just really a fantasy image from a picture book for the French people to delight themselves with.
It
But
was
what
in
we
the
do know is
it was in the modern mechanics and inventions. That's
that's
right.
right. The Ferdinand Lighthouse of the World
Mm.
was displayed on page 45 and 46 of Modern Mechanics and Inventions, and that was published on the 8th of July 1933 by Modern Mechanics Publishing Company in Minneapolis, in Hennepin County, Minnesota, in the upper Midwest of the United States. So
Right.
obviously, the American people got real access to this design in terms of the actual pictorial representation by
Mm.
the French inventor Eugene Freyssinet. It would have been around 701 meters or 2,300 feet tall. It would have
Wow.
been a concrete edifice. Literally, it would have been a beacon of Great Tartaria and the Old
Yeah.
World Empire being honored in really the modern age in the interwar period by the French government, the French people, but it never unfortunately took place. So
Amazing. It's incredible that, and it's worth looking into. I find it, shocking it was in the interwar period as well. I
yeah.
mean, that's so much going on. And just like the time we're in now, you could say what's going on around the world. We don't know. Like,
And
there's a lot of
absolutely. But do remember that when World War II started, the destruction and devastation to buildings
mm,
in Paris and other parts of that area of
immense. Yeah.
central France was absolutely horrendous.
Mm,
And so even more of those buildings that have been designed with Tartarian architecture along the River Seine, where we remember that really much of Paris was a white city from Great
Crocodilos,
Tartarian,
right?
the old
Yeah.
world, yeah, and the old world empire, absolutely. That was all completely destroyed. A lot of it was flat. It wasn't all cleared away in the successive world fairs that were held in Paris and north central France. There was also a lot with obviously the bombing that was done by the Luftwaffe and the Third Reich. So it was like endless deletions going on. And by
Wow.
the time we obviously the World War II came to an end on the 8th of May 1945, so
Yeah.
much deletion had taken place. And it, pretty much it had faded from the memories, and the generations had passed, the decades had passed, and Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire, and especially obviously the Tartarian lighthouses and everything else had literally faded from the historical timeline altogether.
That's amazing, Stephen. Yeah, I think that's what we all need to be aware of is that the decline of our world over time, and how this beauty and this amazing planet that we're on, it's been taken apart piece by piece. And
Absolutely. Yes,
we're
it
living
has.
in that age now again. You can see that that's going on. I mean, I would never have expected this when we were younger. I never saw this coming. But it's incredible. It's shocking, and very sad. It makes me feel very upset that we've allowed this to happen. And sometimes people haven't even been aware that it's happening. But we're at this age now, so we do have the ability to be aware of this. And as always, that's what me and Stephen intend to do with these talks: is make people aware. Make up
That
your
is
own
correct.
mind.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
it's important that these things are questioned. I mean, what happened there? Who is orchestrating that to destruct them buildings, or get rid of those amazing edifices and lighthouses and all this? But amazing, Steve. Thank you, my brother. It's been incredible and really great. And look, I advise everyone to look into this. Look into this information. It's really mind blowing once you start looking at. And the Kassi Lighthouse was like particularly that is pretty mind blowing. And
Yeah.
you got to remember that these were all over the world at some stage. There's many more than these ones that we're told about as well.
Yeah. And I do feel that with further archaeological excavations in the Russian Federation,
Mm,
I think if looking at the Russian Arctic coast, in these remotest areas, it is likely if funding is available in the future and they do start making that concerted effort to go there and do these digs or excavations,
I think you have
they
to go
will
swimming
eventually
up there,
find
Steve.
remnants of these Tartarian lighthouses, or perhaps even Hyperborean lighthouses.
I think we should get a diving suit on and try go up there and see what we find. But
Yeah.
no, I mean it's a tricky task. Any archaeological dig up there would be immense. I mean it's
Yeah,
seriously dangerous.
logistically, it's in terms of transportation and logistics, there would have to be a lot of airlifting of cargo and equipment to get out there with helicopters and so forth. It's so remote, and the roadway access out into large areas of northern Russia can sometimes be a bit problematic.
But it's out there somewhere, everyone, and
Yeah.
it's for us to discover this. It's part of our journey to understand the history and mythology of this planet and what is real and what isn't real. It's what we're kind of here for. But thank you, Stephen. That's been amazing and brilliant stuff. And we've got our book available, Luminous Worlds, and that's on Amazon in ebook and paperback. It's quite a nice big size. That a load of amazing research in there as well. Thank you, Stephen. That's been
All right.
incredible. And it's a bye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.